Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
And just real quick, today's material comes from a SpeakDuo lesson, so you can go to speakduo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to become more confident with their speaking abilities.
Right, so today we are looking at an advanced English ESL lesson plan titled Why the Oscars Don't Work Anymore, which uses Hollywood history to teach complex idioms like smokescreen and kneecap.
Thematic whiplash between the vivid historical context and the mundane practice questions risks disengaging the learner.
Yeah, the lesson introduces these phrases with intense, high-stakes Hollywood lore, like how Louis B. Mayer used the Oscars to literally kneecap labor unions, or how Netflix is running Harvey Weinstein's playbook.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. But then the immediate practice question for the idiom a fool's errand just asks the learner if they've ever tried to fix an old printer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like teaching someone to drive a race car, but only having them practice in a grocery store parking lot.
That is a perfect analogy. Is there a risk that focusing solely on everyday examples like fixing a printer or avoiding a social event might overlook the momentum built by that rich Hollywood context?
Exactly. The weakness here is that the sudden shift from high-stakes, cutthroat industry dynamics to low-stakes daily life entirely dilutes the engaging narrative.
Right, it creates this jarring tonal shift.
It does. It prevents the learner from fully immersing themselves in the lesson's unique angle. Advanced adult learners are looking for intellectual stimulation, so when you pull them out of a fascinating historical narrative for a mundane office chore, cognitive engagement just drops.
I hear what you're saying, but let's look at it from a practical standpoint. Don't ESL learners need to know how to use these phrases in everyday life?
Well, sure, but that assumes professional or high-stakes contexts only exist in Hollywood. The suggestion is to bridge the gap by elevating the practice scenarios to maintain an industry or high-stakes flavor.
Okay, so allowing learners to role-play in more compelling professional contexts.
Exactly. Let's look at some concrete examples for improvement. Instead of asking about fixing a broken printer for its fool's errand, tap back into the lesson's theme.
How would you phrase it?
You could ask, have you ever been assigned a project at work that felt like a fool's errand from the start, much like the academy trying to measure art with a trophy?
Oh, I like that. So we should probably talk about the nuance of a fool's errand here, right? Because it's not just a simple mistake.
Right, a mistake is just an error in judgment. A fool's errand is a deeply hopeless task that is absolutely destined to fail from the very start. It's pointless.
Yeah, that makes sense. Building on that, what if we looked at the idiom to court someone?
Go for it.
Well, instead of a generic prompt about getting a manager's approval, the author could frame it as a workplace role play. Like, imagine you are a movie producer. How would you court a star director to join your independent film?
That's a great example. It keeps them in the driver's seat of the race car. And we should clarify the nuanced difference there, too. Courting is not just networking.
Right, networking is broad and casual.
Exactly. To court someone is to actively try to win an individual's absolute favor through highly calculated personal attention. For example, if a student is doing an IELTS Speaking Part 2 response about a time they persuaded someone, they could say, I spent 3 months courting the lead investor, making sure to align my presentation carefully with his goals.
That sounds incredibly natural for an advanced speaker. Which actually brings up the vocabulary list itself.
Oh, definitely. Teaching highly aggressive idioms without providing pragmatic context leaves advanced learners vulnerable to serious professional missteps.
Because the list is heavily weighted toward these Machiavellian forceful phrases, right? Like kneecap, strong arm, to be one's undoing.
Yeah, which makes sense for media comprehension. But the weakness is that the material fails to equip ESL learners with the sociolinguistic boundaries of these heavy idioms.
So the lack of register or formality warnings could lead a learner to accidentally insult a colleague?
100%. Because the lesson provides straightforward definitions without any danger labels, a learner might inappropriately use a violent metaphor like kneecap in a standard corporate meeting, thinking it's just normal business jargon.
I can see how that would be disastrous. But how do we balance caution with confidence? We don't want them terrified to use the new words.
We just want to empower them with situational awareness. The suggestion is to introduce a tone and context warning, or like a degree of formality meter to the lesson.
To ensure they understand the exact semantic weight and setting for each phrase?
Right. So let's map out some concrete examples. Take kneecap. The lesson needs a strict caution note explaining that it is highly informal, aggressive, and not suitable for speaking to superiors.
So you'd provide a softer alternative for contrast?
Exactly. Contrast kneecap with to undermine. Undermining someone is subtle, like planting seeds of doubt. Kneecapping is taking a metaphorical baseball bat to their project.
Wow, yeah, huge difference.
A good example with a work colleague would be, I felt like the marketing department completely kneecapped our product launch by pulling the ad budget at the last minute.
Makes sense. Let's look at a smoke screen. How do we clarify the nuance there?
Well, a smokescreen is different from a simple distraction. A distraction can be accidental, but a smokescreen is specifically designed to conceal, distract from, or completely disguise the true nature of a situation. It's active deception.
So if speaking to a boss, you might say, the proposed budget cuts seem like a smokescreen to cover up executive mismanagement.
Exactly. It's accusatory. You don't use it lightly. What about to be one's undoing?
The lesson kind of presents it as a synonym for a mistake or a setback.
Which is misleading. A setback is temporary, you recover from it. To be one's undoing means to be the exact thing that ultimately causes a person's complete downfall after years of success.
It has a lot more weight to it.
Shakespearean weight. Like a manager might say, his absolute inability to delegate will ultimately be his undoing, despite his technical skills.
Got it. What about to run someone's playbook?
The nuance there is contrasting it with to copy an idea. Copying is singular and often negative. To run someone's playbook is to exactly copy and directly utilize a specific strategy that another person used to find success.
So, like, instead of reinventing the wheel, let's just run Sarah's playbook from last quarter since it worked perfectly.
Perfect example. Then there's to pay through the nose. This isn't just overpaying.
Right, overpaying is just the math not working out.
Yeah, paying through the nose carries emotional sting. It means to pay an excessively large and remarkably unreasonable amount of money for a service, far beyond its actual cost.
Like in an IELTS Speaking Part 2 response. Because I booked during the holidays, I had to pay through the nose just for a middle seat.
Exactly. And finally, to have one's finger on the pulse. The lesson just defines it as being knowledgeable.
Which misses the dynamic nature of the phrase, right?
Entirely. Being knowledgeable is static. To have your finger on the pulse means to be fully aware of and deeply in tune with the absolutely latest trends or feelings within a specific community.
So a team leader might say, we need to hire a manager who really has their finger on the pulse of Gen Z trends.
Right. It's a moving target. And mapping out all these boundaries is so crucial, which actually brings us to the architecture of the lesson plan itself. The fragmented structure of the vocabulary list fails to deliver on the compelling narrative promised by the lesson's title.
Because the title is Why the Oscars Don't Work Anymore, it promises a deep dive.
Right, an investigation. But the document ultimately functions as a disconnected list of 8 idioms broken up by generic breakout rooms.
Yeah, that's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how to help the learner actually answer the title's core premise using the new vocabulary.
And that is exactly the weakness. The overarching thesis is fractured across disparate slides. By the end, there's no cohesive payoff or synthesis activity connecting the vocabulary back to the main topic.
They're just left with puzzle pieces, but no picture on the box.
Exactly. Cognitive science shows us narrative framing drastically improves retention. So the suggestion is to restructure the flow of the lesson to build a single chronological or argumentative narrative.
Culminating in a final synthesis activity, I assume.
Examples. Group the idioms into thematic acts. Act 1 could be the illusion, focusing on smokescreen and to court someone.
Oh, I see. Then Act 2 naturally becomes the cutthroat tactics.
Right, where you introduce kneecap, strong arm, and running someone's playbook. They can discuss how streaming services strong-arm traditional studios.
And Act 3 is the decline, pulling in to be one's undoing and a fool's errand. That structural progression is fantastic.
It carries the learner through the material, and for the capstone, you dedicate the final breakout room to a debate. You explicitly ask the students to answer, Why do the Oscars not work anymore?
And force them to use at least 3 of the idioms they just learned.
Precisely. They aren't just reciting definitions. They are deploying the words as rhetorical tools.
Well, let's actually test out those definitions right now. We've got a quick quiz on these phrases to help listeners lock in the nuances.
Awesome. I'll read the questions and the options A, B, and C.
And I'll jump in to give you a moment to think. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
Okay, question 1. What is the best definition for the expression a smokescreen? Is it option A, a highly visible marketing campaign designed to significantly boost the overall popularity of a failing brand?
Option B, something specifically designed to conceal, distract from, or completely disguise the true nature of a situation.
Or option C, an overly dramatic reaction intended to forcefully persuade someone into accepting a highly unfavorable agreement.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer for a smokescreen is option B, something specifically designed to conceal or disguise a situation.
Like when you mentioned budget cuts acting as a smokescreen for executive mismanagement.
Exactly. Moving on. How is the verb to kneecap used in a professional or competitive context? Is it option A, to physically exhaust a leading competitor by constantly forcing them to participate in heavily demanding projects?
Option B, to strictly penalize an underperforming colleague by officially demoting them from their current leadership position.
Or option C, to deliberately undermine, deeply weaken, or intentionally sabotage someone to prevent them from gaining any success.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer for to kneecap is option C, to deliberately undermine or intentionally sabotage someone.
Right. Like that aggressive move where the marketing department kneecapped the product launch by pulling the budget?
Nailed it. Next question. If you attempt to court someone, what exactly are you trying to do? Option A, to actively try to win an individual's absolute favor or critical support through highly calculated personal attention.
Option B, to officially summon an employee to a formal legal hearing regarding a surprisingly serious corporate code violation?
Or option C, to aggressively confront a senior manager in order to successfully demand a substantially larger financial settlement.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
For to court someone, the answer is option A, actively trying to win an individual's favor through calculated attention.
Yeah, our example was the producer courting a star director, or courting a lead investor for 3 months.
Exactly. Okay, next up. What does it mean for something to be one's undoing? Is it option A, to intentionally reverse a highly controversial decision made during a remarkably complex and long business negotiation?
Option B, to be the exact thing that ultimately causes a person's complete downfall or absolute failure after years of success.
Or option C, to accidentally reveal a deeply hidden secret that immediately ruins a previously strong and reliable corporate merger.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer for to be one's undoing is option B. It's the thing that causes a person's complete downfall after years of success.
Like that Shakespearean fatal flaw, the brilliant manager whose inability to delegate became his undoing.
Perfect. Let's keep going. Which of the following best describes what it means to run someone's playbook? Is it option A, to thoroughly review a remarkably detailed historical document before launching an entirely new advertising initiative?
Option B, to aggressively challenge a major competitor by predicting their future movements during a critical marketing campaign.
Or option C, to exactly copy and directly utilize the specific strategy or set of tactics that another person used to find success.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
To run someone's playbook is option C, to exactly copy and directly utilize another person's specific strategy.
Right. Running Sarah's playbook from last quarter instead of reinventing the wheel.
You got it. All right. What occurs when a person is forced to pay through the nose? Option A, to pay an excessively large and remarkably unreasonable amount of money for a service far beyond its actual real cost.
Option B, to stubbornly refuse to properly compensate a highly skilled freelance worker for completing a severely demanding task.
Or option C, To secretly bribe a prominent government official in order to quickly secure a massively profitable corporate contract.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer for to pay through the nose is option A, paying an excessively large and unreasonable amount of money.
Which carries that emotional sting, like paying through the nose for a middle seat during the holidays.
Exactly. 2 left. How is a fool's errand best defined according to the lesson? Option A, a remarkably immature and poorly timed practical joke played on a highly respected colleague during a serious meeting.
Option B, a completely pointless, deeply hopeless task or specific mission that is absolutely destined to fail from the very start.
Or option C, a sudden, totally unexpected financial disaster directly resulting from an incredibly irresponsible corporate investment. For a fool's errand, it's option B, a completely pointless, deeply hopeless task destined to fail from the start.
Definitely not just fixing a broken printer, but something more like a doomed project assigned by your boss.
Spot on. Last one. What does it mean to have one's finger on the pulse? Option A, to be fully aware of and deeply in tune with the absolutely latest trends or feelings within a highly specific community.
Option B, to effectively maintain incredibly strict control over a highly sensitive corporate project to prevent any data leakages.
Or option C, to carefully monitor a significantly stressful professional situation.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
And the answer for to have one's finger on the pulse is option A, being fully aware of and deeply in tune with the absolutely latest trends.
Right, that dynamic awareness, like a social media manager with their finger on the pulse of Gen Z trends.
Exactly. Well, that wraps up the quiz. To quickly summarize our actionable feedback for the material today, first, align the practice questions with the high-stakes Hollywood theme so learners aren't jolted into mundane scenarios.
Keep them in the driver's seat.
Second, add pragmatic usage warnings and formality meters for aggressive idioms so learners understand the boundaries of words like kneecap or strong arm.
And finally, restructure the lesson into a cohesive narrative with thematic acts, culminating in a debate where they actually answer the title's core question. We really want to thank the listener for submitting this fascinating lesson plan. The core concept is incredibly strong. We invite you to implement these structural and thematic changes and absolutely submit the revised material back in for another critique. We'd love to see how it evolves.
Because when you're handing an advanced English learner the keys to a high-powered vocabulary, you don't want them practicing in a grocery store parking lot. You want to open up the track and let them see exactly what that engine can do.